12 songs, 12 voices, and then nothing. In the 60s and 70s, R&B and soul gave the world some of its greatest singles records that hit #1, that changed music. But most of the people who sang them vanished. Tonight, the 12 who disappeared after just one song. Number 12, Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers. In 1968, a Vancouver-born singer named Bobby Taylor stood in front of Motown's best songwriters and cut a record called Does Your Mama Know About Me? It climbed the charts. It got airplay across the country. And it should have been the first step in a long Motown career. It wasn't. Taylor and his group, the Vancouvers, never landed another hit that came close. But here's the twist nobody expects. Bobby Taylor is the reason the Jackson 5 exist as we know them. He discovered a young group of brothers performing in Chicago and personally brought them to Berry Gordy's attention, even producing their earliest Motown sessions. He handed Motown its next dynasty and then watched from the sidelines as his own career quietly stalled. Motown had dozens of acts competing for promotion budgets, and Taylor's group simply got buried under bigger priorities. The Vancouvers themselves were seasoned Canadian club musicians who had built a solid reputation on the Pacific Northwest circuit long before Motown ever signed them, which is part of why soul historians still consider their brief catalog underrated today. But reputation on a regional circuit meant nothing against a label juggling the Temptations, the Supremes, and the Four Tops all at once. By the early 70s, the Vancouvers had disbanded, and Bobby Taylor moved into songwriting, production, and mentorship rather than performing. He helped build the empire that made other men legends, while his own name faded from the charts entirely. He would spend the rest of his career on the inside of the machine, never again standing in front of the microphone as the star. Today, Does Your Mama Know About Me is remembered by soul collectors as a lost classic. A record good enough to launch a career that Motown itself never gave the chance to happen. Sometimes, the artist who discovers the superstar is the one history forgets. Number 11, Toussaint McCall. In 1967, a piano player from Monroe, Louisiana, walked into a small regional studio and recorded a slow, aching instrumental vocal hybrid called Nothing Takes the Place of You. It wasn't backed by a major label's machine. It wasn't pushed by a national promotion team. I moved your picture. And yet it climbed all the way into the national top 30, driven almost entirely by jukebox plays and word of mouth across the South.
All in this hole because he's a real dog.
Toussaint McCall had built something rare, a hit powered by pure emotional resonance. An organ-drenched ballad that sounded like heartbreak set to music. Radio stations outside his region picked it up almost by accident. And for a few months, McCall was a genuine national artist, sharing chart space with acts backed by far larger machines than the small regional label behind him. He had no national booking agency, no television relationships, and no major distributor to press enough copies to meet demand in bigger markets, the kind of infrastructure gaps that quietly killed countless regional hits before they could become careers. Then the moment passed. His label lacked the money and connections to capitalize on the momentum, and follow-up singles never found the same audience. McCall kept performing on the Southern Soul circuit for years, respected by musicians but invisible to the mainstream charts that had briefly embraced him. He never signed with a major label, never got the second chance that could have turned one hit into a career, and watched artist after artist with lesser songs get the promotional push he never received. Decades later, Nothing Takes the Place of You resurfaced as a favorite on northern soul dance floors in England, introducing McCall to an audience he never knew he had, long after the industry that could have made him a star had already moved on without him.
Here's something most people don't realize. Only about 10% of you watching will hit subscribe. The other 90% just watch and move on. You made it this far, so you're clearly not most people. Hit subscribe. Back to the countdown.
Number 10. The fantastic Johnny C. Philadelphia, 1967. A dance called the Boogaloo was sweeping through clubs up and down the East Coast, and a singer born Johnny Corley put his name behind it with a record that became an instant anthem, Boogaloo Down Broadway. It shot into the top 10, sold over 1 million copies, and turned Johnny C into a face of the Philly soul sound before Philly soul even had a name. For a brief window, he was everywhere. Television appearances, packed venues, a single that defined a dance craze in real time, and a name that seemed poised to anchor Philadelphia's next great soul movement before Gamble and Huff had even built their empire. But dance craze records carry a hidden expiration date that ballads and love songs simply don't. When the Boogaloo faded from clubs, so did the demand for the man most associated with it. His label pushed follow-up singles, but none captured lightning the way the first one had. And audiences moved on to the next sound just as quickly as they'd embraced this one. By the early 70s, Johnny C had faded from the charts entirely, a casualty of exactly the trend that had made him famous. He continued performing on the oldies circuit for decades, forever introduced by the one song that both built and ended his mainstream career. A strange kind of fame where the crowd knows every word, but almost nobody remembers his real name. Boogaloo Down Broadway remains a foundational record in Philadelphia's soul history, proof that the city could produce hits years before Gamble and Huff turned it into an industry. Johnny C just never got to be part of what came next. Number 9. Bobby Hebb. Grief built one of the most enduring songs in American music. In 1966, Bobby Hebb had just lost his brother to a violent stabbing, and days later, President Kennedy was assassinated. Out of that devastation, Hebb wrote Sunny, a song deliberately built to push back against darkness with light. It became a massive hit, reaching number 2 on the charts, and eventually becoming one of the most covered songs in history. Recorded by everyone from Ray Charles to Frank Sinatra to Stevie Wonder. Hundreds of versions exist across nearly every genre: soul, jazz, easy listening, even reggae reinterpretations, making Sunny one of the most re-recorded compositions in American popular music. But almost nobody remembers that Bobby Hebb sang it first, wrote it first, and lived the grief that produced it. His own career never matched the song's afterlife. Follow-up singles failed to chart. And within a few years, Hebb found himself watching other artists profit from covering the very song that had once been entirely his. He continued writing and touring modestly for decades, largely overshadowed by the massive shadow Sunny cast over popular music, a song so ubiquitous that most people assumed it belonged to whichever famous voice had covered it most recently. Royalties from the song's endless reuse in commercials, films, and cover versions provided him a comfortable living. But the fame that should have come with writing one of the most recorded songs of the 20th century never followed him personally. Bobby Hebb wrote something that outlived every artist who ever touched it, and still walked through the rest of his life, largely unrecognized on the street. Number 8. Irma Franklin. Being the older sister of the Queen of Soul came with a cost nobody talks about. In 1967, Irma Franklin recorded Piece of My Heart, a raw, powerful ballad that became a genuine hit and showcased a voice every bit as commanding as her younger sister Aretha's. For a moment, it looked like Irma might carve out her own lane in soul music, one built on grit and lower register power, rather than the gospel-trained runs her sister was becoming famous for. Then two things happened, almost back-to-back, that buried her chance for good. First, her own label kept comparing her to Aretha, who was exploding into superstardom at the exact same time, making it nearly impossible for Irma to be judged on her own terms. Second, and more devastating, Janis Joplin covered Piece of My Heart 2 years later, turned it into a rock anthem, and claimed the song as her own in the public imagination. Irma Franklin, the original artist, was reduced to a footnote on the liner notes of a song she'd made famous first. She never landed another hit that came close, and by the 1970s had largely stepped away from a recording career that couldn't escape her sister's shadow or Joplin's reinterpretation. She spent later years working outside the music industry entirely, including a stretch in social services. A quiet second life almost nobody watching the charts would have predicted for her. Today, most listeners who know Piece of My Heart think of Janis Joplin first, never realizing the song's power came from a Detroit soul singer who recorded it and lived it before rock and roll ever touched it. Number 7. Robert Knight. A song can become bigger than the man who sang it, and few examples prove that harder than Robert Knight. In 1967, Knight recorded Everlasting Love, a soaring romantic ballad that reached the top 20 and should have launched a lasting career. Instead, it launched everyone else's. Within a decade, Everlasting Love had been covered by Carl Carlton, then by the British group The Love Affair, who took it to number 1 in the UK without ever crediting Knight in the public conversation around it. Then Rex Smith and Rachel Sweet took it into the American pop charts in a duet version. And eventually Gloria Estefan turned it into a hit all over again decades later, introducing it to yet another generation. Each new cover reintroduced the song to a fresh generation, while pushing the man who wrote and originally sang it further into obscurity. Robert Knight actually charted one more song, Love on a Mountaintop, but neither single translated into the sustained career the song's popularity suggested he deserved. Industry politics, thin promotion, and a small independent label with limited reach meant Knight never got the infrastructure that turns a hit song into a lasting name. Bigger labels with bigger budgets could simply outspend and outpromote him on his own material. An imbalance that repeated itself again and again across the soul era for artists without major distribution behind them. He kept performing for smaller audiences for years, occasionally billed as the original voice of Everlasting Love on small venue marquees, a title that says everything about his legacy and everything about how the industry treats the artist who got there first. He wrote something eternal, he just never got to keep it. Number 6. Little Sister. In 1970, Sly Stone handed his younger sister Valletta and her group Little Sister a song called You're the One, produced it himself with the full weight of Sly and the Family Stone's studio innovation behind it, and watched it climb into the national top 30. It should have been the beginning of something. Sly Stone was, at that moment, one of the most powerful and influential producers in American music, riding the massive success of Everyday People and Thank You. and having his direct backing was as close to a guarantee of stardom as an artist could get in 1970. But behind the scenes, Sly Stone's own life was spiraling drug use, missed shows, and mounting chaos that would define the darker chapters of his career. The attention and resources Little Sister needed to build on their hit simply evaporated as Sly's own empire began to crack. His unreliability turning what should have been a launching pad into a group tethered to a sinking ship they had no control over. A follow-up single failed to chart, and without consistent label push, Little Sister dissolved within a couple of years. Vieta Stone continued working as a background vocalist for years afterward, including contributing to her brother's later troubled recordings, staying loyal to a family legacy that never fully paid her back in her own name. You're the One remains a favorite among funk collectors for its raw, innovative production. A preview of sounds that would define the 70s, but the group meant to carry that sound forward never got the chance. Swallowed by the very chaos surrounding the genius who created their one shot. Number 5. Mel and Tim.
Oh, what is she talking about?
Two Mississippi cousins, Mel Hardin and Tim McPherson, recorded Backfield in Motion in 1969. A clever football-themed soul tune that shot into the national top 10 and made Mel and Tim genuine stars almost overnight. For a moment, they looked like the next great soul duo to come out of the Stax orbit, playful and radio-ready in a way that felt built to last. Then their momentum stalled almost as quickly as it arrived, and Mel and Tim spent the next 3 years searching for a follow-up that never came until, in one of the strangest career arcs in soul music, they resurfaced in 1972 with Starting All Over Again, produced at the legendary Stax Studios, and scored a second, smaller hit. It's a technicality worth noting. Most fans only remember the first record, and the duo's true mainstream visibility began and ended with Backfield in Motion. That second hit couldn't survive what came next. In 1975, Stax Records collapsed into bankruptcy. One of the most devastating implosions in music industry history. Buried under debt, mismanagement, and a distribution deal gone catastrophically wrong, taking dozens of careers down with it, Mel and Tim included. With their label gone, and no major company willing to pick up two artists seen as one-hit relics, the duo quietly disappeared from the industry entirely. Mel Hardin passed away years later, largely uncelebrated for a song that, in its moment, had been one of the cleverest and most infectious soul records on the radio, a career caught between one classic hit and a label collapse neither man saw coming. Number 4. The Winstons. The Winstons won a Grammy in 1969 for Color Him Father, a heartfelt tribute to stepfathers that beat out fierce competition and turned the group into overnight stars. It should have been the start of a long, celebrated career. Instead, the band dissolved within a couple of years, undone by lineup changes, thin label support, and the simple difficulty of following up an emotionally specific song that had struck lightning once and couldn't easily strike twice. How do you top a tribute record after the tribute's already been paid? But the most staggering part of the Winstons story has nothing to do with Color Him Father at all. Buried on the B-side of that very single was an instrumental track called Amen Brother,
There's a man in my house,
featuring a 6-second drum solo that nobody paid attention to at the time. Decades later, that 6-second break, now known as the Amen break,
I'm gonna call him Father.
became the single most sampled piece of music in history, forming the rhythmic backbone of entire genres,
Again, but there he stood.
including drum and bass, jungle, and hip-hop, sampled by artists as far removed from soul music as Oasis,
Man, look, yes, I will.
NWA, and countless underground producers who had no idea the sound originated from a Grammy-winning gospel tribute record.
She holds my sister.
It has been used in thousands of songs, commercials, and video games across 5 decades, generating untold millions in value
She never loved
for producers who often had no idea where the sound they'd looped even came from. The Winstons themselves saw almost none of it,
married my mother, and he took us
having never been compensated for a sample that predates modern sampling law entirely. A Grammy-winning group vanished from the charts, while an accidental 6 seconds on their B-side went on to reshape modern music forever. Uncredited and unpaid. In 2015, decades after the song's release, a British radio producer organized a fundraising campaign that surprised founding member Richard Lewis Spencer with a payment of over £20,000, framed as a goodwill gift rather than back royalties.
on to the man with that big.
Since the 6-second sample predates any modern licensing law that could have forced a proper payout. Spencer, gracious but candid, said the gesture meant more to him as recognition than as money after decades of hearing his own drummers playing everywhere.
That's a bite to eat.
From jungle records to blockbuster movie trailers without so much as a phone call.
Very hard to understand.
The Winstons never sued, never fought a legal battle, and to this day receive no ongoing royalties from a break used in more songs than almost any other piece of recorded music in history.
I think I'll color this man love, yes I will.
Number 3. Timmy Thomas. In 1972, Timmy Thomas walked into a Miami studio, essentially alone. Armed with nothing but an organ and a primitive drum machine, and recorded "Why Can't We Live Together?" A stripped-down plea for racial harmony that became an unlikely sensation. It reached number 3 on the pop charts, hit number 1 on the R&B charts, and sold well over 1 million copies, an astonishing achievement. For a record built with almost no traditional production, no horn section, no string arrangement. Just a voice, an organ, and a machine keeping time. For a moment, Thomas was one of the most talked about new voices in soul music, praised for both his social message and his stark minimalist sound, years ahead of its time. But that same minimalism, so celebrated on the debut, became a trap. Thomas struggled to translate his stripped-back sound into a repeatable formula, and his label, eager to chase a bigger, more radio-friendly sound, pushed him toward more conventional productions with horns and strings that diluted exactly what had made him distinctive in the first place. None of the follow-ups found an audience. By the mid-70s, Timmy Thomas had faded from national visibility, continuing to record steadily on smaller labels, but never returning to the charts that had briefly crowned him as one of soul's most original new voices. Decades later, Why Can't We Live Together found new life when Drake sampled it prominently on a massive hit of his own, reintroducing Thomas's voice to millions who had no idea the sample's creator was still alive, still recording, and still largely uncredited by the mainstream that borrowed his sound. Timmy Thomas passed away in March of 2022 at 84 years old, largely outside the spotlight that had once made him a chart-topping name. Obituaries in major outlets barely mentioned him, reducing a man who wrote one of the most sampled and covered protest songs in soul history down to a single line about a 1972 hit. Fellow Miami musicians remembered him differently, as a quiet innovator who proved a message and a drum machine could outsell records built by full orchestras. Years before minimalist production became an industry standard, his influence on the sound of modern soul and hip-hop runs deeper than his chart history alone suggests, even if his name rarely gets credit for pointing the way there first. Number 2. The Independents. Formed in Chicago in the early 70s, the Independents built their sound around lush harmonies and the songwriting of Chuck Jackson and Marvin Yancey, and in 1973, they broke through with Leaving Me, a heartbreak ballad built on tight, gospel-rooted harmonies that climbed into the national top 30 and marked them as one of the most promising new soul groups to emerge from a Chicago scene already crowded with talent. Industry insiders expected a real career to follow. It didn't. Behind the scenes, the group's chief songwriters were being pulled toward other opportunities. Almost immediately, Marvin Yancey in particular was drawn into producing and writing for a young singer named Natalie Cole, helping craft the very songs that would launch her into superstardom. Work that would ultimately define his career far more than anything he ever did for the Independents themselves. As the creative engine behind the group's sound shifted its attention elsewhere, the Independents lost the songwriting continuity that had made their one hit possible. Follow-up singles failed to replicate the chemistry, and by 1975, barely 2 years after their breakthrough, the group had splintered entirely. Some members went on to modest solo work, but none matched what Leaving Me had briefly promised for a group that seemed, for 1 year, unstoppable. The Independents became a case study in a specific kind of soul-era tragedy, a group whose downfall wasn't scandal or addiction, but simply their own songwriters becoming successful enough elsewhere to no longer need them. Marvin Yancey's own story took a tragic turn as well. After leaving the Independents to write and produce for Natalie Cole, the two fell in love and married in 1976, and Yancey went on to co-write some of her biggest hits. But he suffered from serious heart problems for years, and in 1985, he died of a heart attack at just 34 years old, cutting short a career that had already outgrown the group he started with. The Independents, the band he'd left behind to chase that bigger opportunity, had already been gone for a decade by then, meaning the very success that ended their run ultimately outlived only one of the two lives connected to it. Number 1. McFadden and Whitehead. In 1979, Gene McFadden and John Whitehead, veteran Philadelphia international songwriters who had already written hits for other artists for years, finally stepped in front of the microphone themselves and recorded Ain't No Stoppin' Us Now. It became an instant, massive anthem, a number 1 R&B hit, a top 13 pop crossover, and one of the most enduring celebratory records in music history, still played at graduations, championship parades, weddings, and victory celebrations to this day, more than 4 decades later. For two men who had spent years writing hits for other people, it looked like the beginning of a well-earned spotlight of their own. It wasn't. Despite the song's cultural permanence, McFadden and Whitehead struggled to chart as performers again, quickly slipping back into the songwriting and production roles they'd built careers on before their own moment in the spotlight. The irony was brutal. They'd go on writing hits for other artists throughout the 80s, quietly successful behind the scenes, while their own name as performers faded almost as fast as it had risen into the spotlight. Then, in 2006, John Whitehead was shot and killed outside his Philadelphia home in a killing that remains officially unsolved to this day. A tragic, unresolved ending for a man whose most famous lyric had promised the world nobody could stop them. Gene McFadden would pass away just a year later from lung cancer, meaning the two men behind one of the most joyful records ever made were both gone within a year of each other. Largely unrecognized by the public that still sings their song, Ain't No Stoppin' Us Now still plays everywhere, decades later. Almost nobody who hears it today can name the two men who wrote and sang it first. Gene McFadden's own son later stepped in to keep the music alive, touring and performing the song for audiences who often had no idea a second generation was carrying the torch. The record itself became bigger than any single artist ever could, adopted by sports teams as a victory anthem, played at celebrations across every kind of divide,
I know you know someone.
and sampled or interpolated by artists in hip-hop and dance music decades after its original release. It's one of the rare songs so thoroughly absorbed into American culture that most people who've danced to it at a wedding have never once looked up who actually wrote it.
And if you've ever been held down before,